Morant with a running start. It dunks! Oh my goodness! Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance. Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast, a spooky Halloween edition. The Grizzlies lost to the Brooklyn Nets. They lost to a rest-disadvantaged Brooklyn Nets team and have now fallen to 2-3 on the season. They lost Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart to injury in the game. It seemed like, non-controversially, they had the two best players in the game by a mile in John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., but neither one of those players play 30 minutes in the game, and the Grizzlies lose by 13. So, on today's horrifying Halloween episode, we're going to talk about that game, and let's get right into it. It's going to be a shorter episode than normal because the Grizzlies are playing on a back-to-back. They play the Milwaukee Bucks tonight on Halloween. Now, after starting the season 2-1, I think we all observed that the Grizzlies have a really great opportunity to get off to a very strong start. After winning that home game against the Magic, the rest of the homestand was the Bulls, the Nets, and the Bucks. And it's not shocking that they dropped one of these first two games of the week against the Bulls or Nets, but it's a little bit shocking they lost both of them. And the manner that they lost had very similar notes. Both times you are not playing your best players that many minutes. Now, we think, of course, Jaren Jackson Jr. has some form of minutes limitation as he comes back from his hamstring injury. They're being conservative with those minutes. He played just about 24 minutes in the loss to the Bulls where they blew a 20-point lead. By the way, the Bulls erased another 20-point lead on Wednesday night. They came back and defeated the Orlando Magic. So consecutive come-from-behind victories for the Chicago Bulls. But Jaren, of course, had a plus 41 net rating coming into this game. Against the Nets, no one could guard him. Jaren was 10 out of 12 from the field. He had 30 points in his 28 minutes. His plus-minus was not as stark as previous games. He actually was a -1 overall. But Jaren could score anytime he wanted. The Nets were not double-teaming him. They did not have Nick Claxton, their starting center. They were guarding him with Dorian Finney-Smith a lot of the time. Yet the Grizzlies could not take advantage of that matchup. John Morant, who played 29 minutes, John Morant struggled from the field, only made 5 out of his 16 field goal attempts. He somehow missed a reverse dunk. It looked like maybe it bounced off his head, but then it turned out no, he just kind of missed it. He only had 2 points in the first half. He got it going a little bit in the third quarter, started being a little more aggressive for his own shot. But John Morant did not have a good shooting game, but still, the Grizzlies won his minutes. In the 19 minutes, John Morant was off the court. They were outscored by 17 points. And using some of these bench players, you were forced into that. Because of Marcus Smart, he twisted his ankle after playing 6 minutes. He did not score. So Marcus Smart leaves the game. You're down another player on the wing. Desmond Bane suffers an oblique injury, and we don't know the severity of either of these injuries. I mean, you can go ahead and assume Marcus Smart's not playing against the Bucks. I guess I would be surprised if Desmond Bane played against the Bucks. But now you're just crossing your fingers and saying, please don't be out for 2 weeks, Desmond Bane. Like, that is sort of I think a hurdle you maybe cannot overcome. You're already so shorthanded. No Vince Williams Jr., no Gigi Jackson. By the way, Gigi Jackson said on a podcast he's expecting to come back in January. Sweet. They're supposed to announce an update on Vince Williams Jr. later this week. He's getting more imaging. Cross your fingers, Vince Williams Jr. is on the way back soon. I mean, if we don't get Vince Williams Jr. back, it's looking pretty dire. Meanwhile, Luke Kennard hasn't played yet. It's been 233 days since Luke Kennard played a basketball game. Now, there is some bad injury luck. I like to reemphasize, when Luke Kennard is not available and when Marcus Smart is not available, that's not bad injury luck. That's just a state of being of having those guys on your team. That's what you signed up for. And oh, by the way, another little storyline of the loss to the Nets is the Zaire Williams revenge game. Zaire Williams had 17 points and 4 steals. Zaire Williams, you salary dumped. You included a second-round pick to get rid of him. This offseason, reminder, I think I talked about this more than anybody who covers the Grizzlies. This offseason, the Grizzlies drafted Zach Edey and then tried to stay under the luxury tax. In doing so, they salary dumped Zaire Williams so they could keep Luke Kennard and stay out of the luxury tax. Luke Kennard has not played a game this year. Zaire Williams just embarrassed you in your own house. Zaire Williams torched Jalen Wells in that third quarter. Got past him whenever he wanted. I mean, that's another story to the game. The Grizzlies' defense was horrible. And after the Bulls game, where Taylor Jenkins said they didn't give a lick about playing defense, after the Bulls game, apparently on Tuesday, the team practiced and the focus of the practice was defense. And then you come out on Wednesday and you don't play any defense at all. Taylor Jenkins said it was disappointing. He said he's got to do a better job of getting the team prepared. I agree. I mean, what does that mean when the team's not playing defense? Right now, the Grizzlies have a 118 defensive rating for the season. The formula that I think most of us highlighted for the Grizzlies being good this year was having a top 10 defense. It's early, and taking 5-game sample sizes are generally meaningless. But right now, they're 23rd in the NBA in defensive rating. Have they played good offenses? No. No, I don't think so. I mean, we might be surprised at the end of the season when we look back and figure out who the good offenses are. But let's do a reminder of who the Grizzlies have played. The Jazz. The Jazz might be the worst team in the NBA. The Grizzlies beat them by 2. They've played the Jazz. They played the Rockets, who are not a good offensive team. They played the Magic, not a good offensive team. They played the Bulls and the Nets. Jazz, Rockets, Magic, Bulls, Nets. You're 23rd in defensive rating after those 5 games. Also, the Grizzlies turned the basketball over 22 times in this game. The Brooklyn Nets, I would bet you right now, aren't going to force 22 turnovers in a game for the rest of the season. I mean, I put it at even odds. Minus 110, do the Nets have another game this year where they force 22 turnovers? Because of the injury situation and because of how early it is in the season, nothing's apocalyptic. But now you're facing, hey, can we just win one of these games this week? What if you lose on a back-to-back to the Bucks? This was your rest advantage game. The Nets went into overtime on Tuesday night. They didn't get into Memphis until 3 a.m. You lose that game, now you're facing the Bucks, who are actually rested. They've had 2 days off before the game on Thursday night. So, because of the injuries, because of the low minutes for Ja Morant, 29 minutes, low minutes for Jaren Jackson Jr., 28 minutes. That means, of course, you're relying heavily on your bench again. And I think you could correctly say after the first 4 games that everybody's been pretty good off the bench. Maybe you don't love it that all the bench guys are playing together, and I, of course, do not love it when all the bench guys play together. And that's another thing. They're not staggering the starters. Of course, once you lose Desmond Bane, he left in the third quarter, a few minutes into the third quarter. Once you lose Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart, what staggering are you going to do? It's just Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. They did stagger those guys for the first 15 minutes or 14 minutes of the second half. One of them was on the court at all times. But then there was a 4-minute stretch in the fourth quarter where Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. were not on the court. They were both on the bench. And at some point, it seems like you just got to go win the basketball game. Don't you just have to go win the basketball game? I'm a little bit frustrated with the local media. I'm not there, so it's easy for me to criticize that no one asked this question. I hope someone asked this question on Thursday night. Taylor, did Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. have specific minute caps? Or are their limited minutes so far a strategic decision? If it's a strategic decision, why do you think that's the best way for the Grizzlies to win? Or how do you think that's the best way for the Grizzlies to win? Now, Chris Harrington wrote an article for the Daily Memphian where he correctly pointed out that the Grizzlies have historically gotten off to some slow starts under Taylor Jenkins. This is something I've talked about on the show before, where they make an investment in their entire roster early in the season to give them minutes. You hope you reap the benefits of that later. There have been stretches in Taylor Jenkins' coaching career in January, in December, where the Grizzlies turn into a buzzsaw and win a bunch of games in a row. So hopefully that investment in Jalen Wells minutes, it's going to pay off. The investment in Jake LaRavia minutes. Oh, poor Jake. Rough game for Jake LaRavia. By the way, Jake LaRavia still leads the Grizzlies in on-off net rating swing. They're 4 points better on defense when Jake LaRavia plays this year. On-off net rating swing, like mini stats, it can be noisy. But like Jake LaRavia, 1 out of 10 from the field. But you're playing these guys, Pippen and Wells and LaRavia and Jay Huff together. And you're playing them high leverage minutes in the fourth quarters of games. The Grizzlies saw the Nets increase their lead in that fourth quarter stretch where both Ja and Jaren were on the bench. By the time they get back in, you're down 12. There's 5 minutes left. Your odds of winning are extremely low. So even while you're missing guys, and even while you're struggling with in-game injuries like Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart, you still had by far the 2 best players in the game. Now, if someone who didn't follow the NBA tuned in to watch that game, they would not have said the Grizzlies had the 2 best players in the game. They would have said Dennis Schroeder's the best player in the game. Not a single soul had any interest in staying in front of Dennis Schroeder. Not Ja Morant, not Desmond Bane, not Jalen Wells, not Scottie Pippen Jr. I mean, it was brutal. I mean, it's not just that Zaire lights you up for 17 points and gets 4 steals, but Dennis Schroeder had 33 points, 8 assists. I mean, that was a hard watch. It was a hard watch. Meanwhile, speaking to the bench minutes, this might be confirmation bias, but like the numbers after 5 games are starting to kind of bear out maybe what we would have expected coming into the year. Like, hey, when Scottie Pippen Jr. and Jake LaRavia and Jalen Wells are all on the court, you're getting trucked. Right now, those guys have played 39 possessions together, and the Grizzlies have been outscored 61-37 in those minutes. Like just Jake LaRavia and Scottie Pippen Jr. on the court together, they have played the 4th most minutes of any 2-man combination for the Grizzlies this year. And they've lost those minutes by 25 total points. That's 64 minutes minus 25 right now in raw plus minus. It's just, I think, a product of if you're playing your bench and your bench doesn't have a clear advantage over your opponent, it's going to be bumpy at times. And then you look at that bench, and again, this goes back to the offseason. I wanted them to add players that were proven. I wanted to add players that were better than John Conchar and Jake LaRavia. They didn't add anybody. They drafted Zach Edey. They drafted Jalen Wells. Now, they used their open roster spots to promote Scottie Pippen Jr. and Jay Huff. If you told me a year ago the bottom 4 roster spots that you were going to use for the 15-man squad was going to be a rookie, Scottie Pippen Jr., and Jay Huff, I would have asked, what are we doing? I mean, I know they're trying to compete over a long period of time without spending money, without going into the luxury tax. It's a hard needle to thread. And Wells might turn out to be a great player. He's been promising so far. He had a pretty good game in this one. He scored 9 points, had 4 assists. Maybe my favorite play of the game? I'm not sure. The best play between both rookies was Zach Edey getting an offensive rebound in the third quarter and then giving it to Jalen Wells for a tough finish at the basket. By the way, Zach Edey. All right, Zach Edey had 13 points, matching his career best so far. All 13 points were scored in the first half. The team did a good job of finding him for dunks over and over and over. They also had a nice high-low play. Jake LaRavia found him for a dunk where he sealed his man. By the way, Jake LaRavia, yes, 1 out of 10 from the field. He did have 5 assists, got all 5 of his assists in the first half. Also had 7 rebounds. Jake got 5 offensive rebounds. This is something I talked about after the preseason. Jake is doing everything well except for shooting, and shooting's a big deal. But Edey has 13 points in the first half. Edey does not take a field goal attempt in the second half. This is the second consecutive game where Zach Edey does not attempt a field goal in the second half. It seems like they try to get Zach Edey the ball on offense, particularly because on defense, he's bad. Like, he's quite bad on defense. He's not playing in the fourth quarters because he's so terrible at defense. He's a traffic cone right now. Not only is he slow, he's slow to react. He made Dorian Finney-Smith look like Dennis Schroeder with the speed that Dorian Finney-Smith blew by him. If Zach Edey, who is your entire focus of your offseason, as in this is the player we're adding, if he's not very good, that puts you pretty far away from competing at the level that you hope to compete at. But still, this was, I guess, on offense, a better game from Edey. I mean, 13 points in the first half. I'm not going to turn my nose up at that. He finishes with 0 defensive rebounds. Currently, the Grizzlies still have a negative 15 net rating when Zach Edey's on the court this season. 0 defensive rebounds for Zach Edey. He got 2 offensive rebounds. He got that 1 assist to Jalen Wells. Desmond Bane, before he left with injury, had 10 points and 6 rebounds. He only made 1 3-pointer. Of course, he had to leave the game, so he only played 16 minutes or 17 minutes or so. But still, this now means in 2 out of the last 3 games, he's failed to make at least 2 3-pointers. That's after he had a 28-game streak of making 2 or more 3-pointers. Scottie Pippen Jr. was not very effective. He had 4 assists. He had 5 points. He committed 4 fouls and had 3 turnovers. The fouls he's committing are harmful. They're putting the other team in the bonus. He committed a 3-shot shooting foul. He's also creating some on-court skirmishes, which I guess is fine. He got Keon Johnson ejected, basically, by initiating a play with him. Ended up being double techs. But Scottie Pippen Jr. was not very good in this game. Santi Aldama scored 2 points. So now in 2 of the 5 games this year, Santi only has 2 points. I was very confused why Santi Aldama was not used more. Specifically, why wasn't Aldama used more after Bane and Smart went out? Aldama only had 22 minutes in the fourth quarter. In the fourth quarter rotation, of course it's going to be strange when you're missing all those players. But like, Aldama wasn't even out there. He finally checks in with 2 minutes left to play the 3. It seemed like they could have played more Santi at the 3. Everything was just out of kilter. I think Taylor Jenkins was out of kilter. I know it's probably hard somewhat to prepare when you lose Bane and Smart, and maybe they did not have all of these minutes plotted out beforehand. But the idea that this was a strategic decision with the way the substitution patterns went all game, it's kind of wild to me. I understand keeping the minutes low, but just like the guys who were getting in and when they were getting in, didn't seem like anybody ever got in a very strong rhythm. Now, maybe one of the only bright spots from this game I mean, Jaren, of course, 30 points in 28 minutes, made all 3 of his 3-point attempts. But Brandon Clark looks really good. Brandon Clark had 13 points, also had 2 steals, made all 5 of his field goal attempts. Brandon had been looking a little shaky in some previous games. I said last episode I want more Brandon Clark minutes. I don't care. I believe in him. I believe a limited Brandon Clark is still a good basketball player, and he looks really good. And right now, we're seeing the same thing where Brandon Clark on the court with Ja, on the court with Jaren, the team is clicking. It's extremely early, but the returns are good after 2 games of Brandon and Jaren playing together. They already have a plus 54 net rating. Now we're still, possessions are meaningless, but add that to 4 to 5 years of evidence that they're very, very good together. So it was great seeing Brandon Clark getting up and down the court. John Conchar played 19 minutes in this game. He hit 1 3 and he airballed a 3. Conchar was the 12th guy. He was not in the rotation, but then once Marcus Smart goes down, all of a sudden he's starting the second half. So he got called up from not going to play tonight to, hey, you're now playing with the starters. He had 3 points and 3 rebounds in his 19 minutes. An overall storyline, too, is just the Grizzlies didn't make 3-pointers. They were 8 out of 27 on 3-pointers. So low volume and, of course, extremely low hit rate, only making 8 3-pointers. They had about 60 points in the paint. That should be good enough. But they turned the basketball over so many times. They couldn't get stops. Meanwhile, the Nets made 15 3-pointers and also scored a ton in the paint. And because of that, the Grizzlies drop to 2 and 3. Also, the Grizzlies won the third quarter for the first time all season. They won the third quarter 28-24. First time they'd outscored their opponent in the third quarter. They also trailed at halftime for the first time all season, but still the fourth quarter was not nearly good enough. Of course, Ja Morant was only on the court for 5.5 minutes of the fourth quarter. Jaren Jackson Jr. only played 6.5 minutes of the fourth quarter. In previous seasons, Ja Morant has played heavy fourth quarter minutes. That was the strategy. There was the year, I think 2 years ago, he was maybe the top fourth quarter scorer. He's one of the best fourth quarter scorers in the NBA. So far, they're limiting the minutes. And I think they're saying it's a strategic decision. And it feels like a risky gamble. I don't know if there's an actual hot seat for Taylor Jenkins. I think he's proven enough in the regular season that you're like, all right, it's going to work out eventually. I think this is a thing he got from Mike Budenholzer. Mike Budenholzer, an amazing regular season coach, and he plays a lot of guys. But right now, the investment feels painful. Hopefully, we will reap those benefits sooner rather than later. Anyways, the Grizzlies play the Bucks tonight. I ended up going almost a full 23 minutes. You're welcome. Anyways, if you want to support this program, go to patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Really appreciate everyone over there, especially those of you in the Grits and Grinds listener Slack, as we commiserate together about a 2-3 start. Now you just got to bounce back. You got to beat the Bucks and find your winning ways at home. Anyways, hope you have a safe and happy Halloween. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.